Well, it's the 23rd of May and Michelle and I are here outside Parliament House to give you an update on the No Jab No Play that's being brought into WA with a time frame of July this year. So essentially the No Jab No Play was tabled in the West Australian Parliament on the 8th of May, and this was tabled after a consultation, a public consultation in March, but this consultation and submissions have not been publicised, and when the No Jab No Play policy was tabled in the WA Parliament, they suppressed the public consultation process. So these submissions and the consultation process provide the evidence for why the government would be deciding to go ahead with this policy, and yet the public has not been given an opportunity to scrutinise this evidence and discuss it. In fact, when the No Jab No Play was tabled on the 8th of May, there was no media coverage of the fact that the government was going ahead with this policy. So parents are wanting transparent evidence for this policy, for the suggestion that unvaccinated children pose a risk, more of a risk in society, or even that they're at greater risk from these diseases than the vaccinated children. And we have previously provided the Health Minister Roger Cook with 6 specific questions to provide this evidence that this policy is necessary. And we submitted them in the consultation process in March, and we then resubmitted them to the Health Minister Roger Cook when this bill, just after this bill was tabled on the 8th of May. But to date, we still have not had answers to these questions, and Roger Cook has not met with us today to provide these answers to us. So with regard to this policy, for the people that are not aware of what the No Jab No Play policy will mean for every parent and grandparent in WA, it means that the government will be mandating, at this point they're mandating 12 vaccines which require 49 doses by the time children reach 15 years of age. Now, this vaccination program has expanded gradually over the years from 1960, 1975, all the way up to 2018, where the government recommends now 16 vaccines to children before the age of 15. And whilst it's recommending 16 vaccines, it has only mandated 12 of those now for children to enrol in childcare centres in WA if the No Jab No Play goes through. It means that children, even if they have 11 vaccines, they will not be considered fully vaccinated and hence will not be permitted to enrol in childcare. Now, this policy has removed the rights of children to participate in society without all of these vaccines. And the government has not provided evidence that not fully vaccinated children are a risk to the public. And I also ask all of you parents and grandparents to think yourselves, have you been required to have 12 vaccines to participate in society? Have you had all the 12 vaccines to 16 vaccines that have been recommended by the government in 2018? Because if you haven't, you are considered not fully vaccinated. And yet, throughout Australia's history, right up until 2016, Australians have always had the choice in how many vaccines they use in their bodies. Now this is significant because in 2016, the government mandated 12 vaccines for parents to receive childcare benefits that are up to $26,000 per child per year now for the maximum benefit for the parents that cannot live without these benefits. And this is quite an incentive for parents to give their children the 12 vaccines. So in other words, parents are now giving up the right to the child's bodily integrity, their right to choose what they put into their children in the name of health, and giving that right to the government, who will then decide what activities in society they can participate in And in the future, this is also being expanded to adults and has already been done with adults and their employment situations. So we're trying to alert the community that a fundamental human right of bodily integrity is being removed with the implementation of these no jab, no pay and play policies. And in implementing this policy, I think it's really important that we look at the evidence from other countries. And I will point out that in Japan, they do not use the MMR vaccine because they know of the serious risks associated with that vaccine, and they use a different measles vaccine. In Japan and Sweden, they also only recommend half the number of vaccines that we are recommending in our children in Australia. And when you look at the health of these children, they have lower infant mortality rates in Sweden and Japan, and they have healthier children in terms of less chronic illness. In Australia and the US today, who use the most vaccines in children, we have the highest chronic illness in children. Children's health has declined significantly as this program has expanded. And this is what we want the government to answer to. We want transparent evidence that these vaccines are safe and effective. And in these countries like Sweden and Japan, that recommend half the number of vaccines, they have stated they will not mandate vaccines in the community because it is against civil rights. So we'd like to alert parents that this program is going through, and we would like transparent evidence to support this program. The 6 specific questions that we have asked Roger Cook and the Australian Medical Association to answer are here on these posters that Michelle will read out. What are the statistics for the number of vaccinated and unvaccinated children in WA per year that are getting each of these 16 diseases and that are dying of these 16 diseases? That information has never been presented to the public to show in a transparent way that an unvaccinated child is more at risk than a vaccinated child. And we know from many of the outbreaks of measles and chickenpox and whooping cough in the population, it is often vaccinated children that are getting these diseases. So we would like the health department to provide us with the evidence of the number of cases of vaccinated and unvaccinated children that are getting these diseases. Question 2. We've asked Minister Roger Cook to tell us which communities have used these 16 vaccines with a 95% uptake rate to control these diseases. This evidence is essential if you are going to prove that vaccines created herd immunity to control these 16 diseases. There is no country that has ever used a vaccine with a 95% uptake rate to reduce the risk of death and illness to these diseases. That risk was reduced in developed countries by 1960. So that is an essential question that needs to be answered for mandating vaccines, because we need proof that vaccines can create herd immunity before you mandate any vaccine in the community. So question 3, what statistics can you provide that show that the overall health of WA children, that is chronic illnesses and illnesses to infectious diseases, has improved since 1990 when the vaccination program expanded? So we're saying here children's health is more than just infections from infectious agents. Our quality of life depends upon chronic illnesses as well as infectious diseases. And I can tell Mr. McGowan now that 45% to 50% of 0 to 15-year-old children now have one or more chronic illness throughout their lives. And this illness includes allergies and anaphylaxis and autoimmune diseases such as diabetes and arthritis. And many of these illnesses are listed as side effects on the package inserts and have been for decades. So we need to consider this evidence in our risk-benefit of the use of 16 vaccines in children. Now, question 4. Are WA politicians and doctors informed of the ingredients of the 16 vaccines and the serious adverse events that are listed by the pharmaceutical companies on the package inserts? These have been there for decades, 6 decades in fact. We have about 150 serious adverse events, including cancer and autism, that is listed on the package inserts. And my question to the Health Minister is, what does he know about the ingredients of vaccines, and what serious adverse events has he been informed of which are being assessed in this policy to implement a no jab, no play policy in WA? So do WA politicians and doctors provide this information to the public and patients in a transparent manner before they recommend vaccines to the community? Because this is essential information for fully informed consent to a medical intervention that breaches our bodily integrity if we are going to give this right to the government. So, question 5, what percentage of WA children will die or be harmed by this policy because of the known side effects of the chemicals in the vaccine and the hidden effects that occur in individuals due to their genetic makeup? So we all know that you can have a gene for a particular disease, but it doesn't have to be expressed in your lifetime. And this family history was always considered as a contraindication to vaccines prior to 1990, when they started expanding this program. And now these contraindications, known contraindications as a result of family history, have been removed as medical exemptions from the medical exemptions list. And doctors are not being allowed to assess individuals with respect to their family history and the possible diseases that they are predisposed to get because of their genetics. So ignoring the diverse genetics of the population is a serious risk to public health. So we would like to have accurate information on what children will die or be harmed from this policy. What adverse events have you included in this risk assessment? How did you arrive at this risk assessment? Now, if you look at the Department of Justice in the US, their report from the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program, they have paid out over $4 billion in compensation to vaccine injury victims, which they know represents only 1% of the known vaccine injuries that are occurring in children and adults. Now, here in Australia, we don't have a compensation scheme. And the reason that only 1% is ever acknowledged in terms of adverse events is because that many of these adverse events come out later in life. The chemicals have latent effects on the genes. This is called epigenetics. And the reactions will occur months or years even. These autoimmune diseases such as diabetes, multiple sclerosis, chronic fatigue syndrome can occur months or years after the vaccine is given. And this is why it is known that only 1% of adverse events are ever recorded. The government does not use a systematic monitoring system to determine the type and frequency of adverse events in the population after they receive a vaccine. And this is critical scientific evidence to mandate this drug in healthy people in the population. So I'd like to also point out that in Oregon, in the US recently, they succeeded in defeating the vaccine bill that was to mandate vaccines in Portland, in Oregon. This bill has been defeated because it is against civil rights. As I mentioned, in Sweden and Japan, they have stated they will not mandate vaccines. It is against civil rights. And in Australia, even when infectious diseases were rife in Australia, vaccines have always been a choice, and hence never been used with a 95% uptake rates. And most of the vaccines on the schedule today have never been used by parents or grandparents. And you have now accepted that your children cannot participate in society without using 12 vaccines. And that figure now can be changed at any time by the government if this policy goes through. the government can choose to mandate all 16 of the vaccines that are currently recommended on the National Immunisation Program. So we would like this transparent evidence, and we did ask that Roger Cook meet with us here today so that we could to answer these questions and to tell us why the public consultation process on all the submissions have been suppressed and withheld as this policy is being discussed in Parliament. To date, he hasn't provided us with the answers to these questions, and nor has the Australian Medical Association. This bill is due to be discussed again on the 4th of June in WA. So we will be keeping you informed of what happens at that discussion, and hopefully we will be able to have a community gathering to show the government that we do consider that we should have a right to see with transparency the evidence supporting this policy that will remove human rights, a fundamental human right for parents to choose not only what is injected into their healthy children, but as this program is being expanded to adults as well, it will also affect what they choose, their decision as to how many vaccines they will use in their own bodies. So please be aware of this policy as it goes through, and we hope that you'll fight for your human rights in Australia so that we retain the right to choose which medicines, which drugs, a vaccine is a drug, we choose to put in our bodies with fully informed consent to the risks and the benefits.